back to Unfiltered Unspoken. And today we have hit Bali, Indonesia. I just wanted to say that at the beginning. We are happy to have Martin O'Toole on today. He is on his pursuit to happiness. He has been through childhood traumas, adult traumas, depression, mental health, and he is overcoming. There is more to share. So I'm going to bring Martin up so he can introduce himself, and then you know what's going to happen next. Sid is going to kick off the first question. Hey, Martin, welcome.
Hello, good morning from Indonesia, ladies. How are you?
Wonderful.
We're good.
Great. So yes, you've made it all the way to the island of Bali.
And we're
the podcast
excited.
is spreading wide. Absolutely.
But just I'm sorry, you can just give us a short synopsis of your whole journey.
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. Well, I'll try to keep it, as you say, short. I grew up into an alcoholic family. My mum was an alcoholic. She was a teacher, very good teacher actually, but every night she would get excessively, ludicrously drunk. So, as you can imagine, growing up in that kind of household, with the shouting and the crashing and the banging and the strange scenes and the insanity, it caused a lot of issues for the whole family. Myself and two brothers had to grow up in this, and I suppose the strange thing about growing up in an environment like that for a child is really you're only going to go one of two ways. You're going to survive it, or you're going to be deeply affected, or you're going to survive it and be deeply affected, come to think about it. And really I was the latter. So I normalized this behavior, as a lot of people do. Ultimately, if this is the way your household is, then this is the way it is, right? And you've just got to get on with it. So having normalized some very strange behaviors, I then grew into quite an angry, misguided, and emotionally inept young man. Not that I was particularly aware of it, if you understand, because more often than not, we're not. When we have a mental illness, it's not always that obvious to us that we have it. Of course, it's obvious to other people around us that there's something not quite right with us, that we are constantly angry or showing, or depressed, or showing other signs of other mental illnesses. So I took all of that into my adult life, and regardless of it, I actually became quite successful. I was in the advertising industry, and in the UK, co-founding creative agencies. But along the way, I very early on, I started drinking, and it's drinking and drugs are quite commonplace in the advertising industry. So before I knew it, I was a heavy drinker and a heavy cocaine user. And as it later transpired, when I worked all of this out, actually it transpired I'd been an alcoholic, a cocaine addict, a sex addict, a narcissistic gaslighter, and obviously highly depressed, as you mentioned in the introduction, Demetria. So I got to the point in 2015 where actually my mum had died, and they say that actually someone's death can be the best thing that happens to you in a way, and actually this was, although it wasn't at that time. So with her dying, I had an awful lot of shame and regret to deal with, and a lot of unspoken things, obviously from my perspective and from her perspective. So I got to the point where I had a bottle of gin inside me, a load of narcotics, and I cleaned a double barrel shotgun, and then I loaded the shotgun, and I put it down on the floor in front of me, and I pointed the barrels at my head, and I was about to kill myself. I'd had absolutely enough. I was ashamed, depressed, worried, angry. I was lost in a swirling vortex of depression, and I'd got to the point where I was really in the plug hole, and I could not get out. And so there I was, about to blow my brains out, and my beagle, quite a young dog at the time, just sort of pushed the door open into the room and just sat down in the light, coming in from the kitchen, right next to me, and sort of looked at me as if to say, well, I don't know what she was saying. She was either saying, don't do it, or she was saying, who's going to feed me? Or maybe both. But either way, she stopped me from killing myself. And that was the beginning, I would say, of a very long journey of personal transformation. So fast forward to where I'm at now. I've worked with psychotherapists. I then started working with psychedelics, ayahuasca in particular, which it's safe to say pretty well cured my addiction. And then I started to work with other Eastern modalities: yoga, meditation, breath work, sound healing, qigong, and I'm a completely different person today. So so having come very close to suicide, I perhaps very paradoxically ended up publishing a book this year called How to Die Happy, because along the way I discovered what I believe to be a workable process for anyone to truly understand and attain everlasting happiness.
Wonderful. It sounds like you have had experiences for sure. And you've given us a lot to work with here. So I just want to say kudos to you for being so self-aware. Because you said I was a narcissist, I was an alcoholic, I was a sex addict, I was a so I was like,
I was a very naughty boy, Sid.
Exactly, but it's good to be transparent about it. So.
Yes. So kudos to you. And your picture quality is lovely. What kind of camera is that?
That's what I said.
I'm sorry, my mind is everywhere. I'm listening, but I'm like, good God, this is looking like a production right now.
Sony A6 400 with a 50mm lens. Very good for podcasts.
A6
Sony A6 400.
All right.
Yeah. And you put a 50mm lens on it, so you get this really nice depth of field, with everything knocked out the back.
Very much so. You were giving us very much professional today. Yes,
investment.
I like that. Well, just jumping into things. You did say, growing up, your mother. Was it both parents, or were you, raised by your mother?
I was raised by both parents, but my dad was a traveling salesman, so he was away a lot, and really he has a very avoidant personality. Certainly did in those days. So it was it was me and my little brother. My older brother was 8 years my senior, so it was just James and I that were constantly together in this environment, I suppose. As soon as my older brother was able, he moved out. Of course, as soon as we were able, we moved out. But we were, two small kids having to deal with some real madness. My mum, bless her, she was. They talk about the demon of drink, and she was possessed by the demon of drink. She would every night she would come home with these 2 big bottles of wine. Not the regular bottle of wine, but the big one. And she would, leave us with some sort of food, and then she would sit upstairs in her bedroom, chain smoke, and just drink this wine. And I have mental images of me wanting to go and make her feel better, but then also obviously talk to her about me, because that's what a son or a child wants to do with their parent. But I couldn't go into this room. The door was always slightly open, so there was through the hinge, the crack in the hinge, I could see through the crack in the hinge. So I would just sit quietly outside the room, just watching her. But she would often be hissing and swearing, and like talking to somebody in the room. It was quite a disturbing thing to see. Ultimately, having done a great deal of work to understand how this affected me, it transpired, of course, that I had significant intimacy issues as a result of this. As you likely know, the first 8 years of our life, early childhood development years, are the crucial years where we form our relationship with males and females, and we're looking at our two primary caregivers for that, if we're lucky to have two, certainly in terms of the typical role models anyway, so a male role model and a female role model. So if one's regularly absent and the other one is well, this very, very mentally ill and unavailable, then you wind up creating your own story about what life is supposed to be. And of course, you wind up creating your own ideas about how you're supposed to respond to events based on what you witness. So as you can imagine, I would come into the bathroom often in the middle of the night and find my mum just sprawled naked on the bathroom floor, unconscious. I wound up with some very bizarre ideas about intimacy and about relationships, about how to emotionally regulate. Well, I couldn't emotionally regulate. That's the long and the short of it. So, yeah, anybody listening out there who has grown up in alcoholic families, and I'm sure there'll be many people can no doubt relate. It's a very strange environment for a child.
I
So,
agree. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
oh yeah. So I have a question. Where was your dad?
Well, he was there, but he kind of wasn't there, if that makes sense. He was because he was traveling a lot as a salesman. He would stay away during the week sometimes, well, often. But it's a strange thing. I don't have this. When you go back to your memories, you can only see what the child can see, right? Actually, if I think about it, because he was working so much, he would be coming from another part of the country. He would get home often when we were asleep. So because we were children. I'm the memory I have as I talk to you now. I think I was probably age 5 or 6. So we would see him, but the relationship was really with our mum, because she would pick us up from school. She would take us to school and she would pick us up from school, and we would spend some time in the car all together as well. So I suppose that's just a typical thing, isn't it? Or at least it was. I was born in 1975, so I'm sure parenting has advanced since then. One hopes that parenting has advanced since then.
Yeah, because I'm a 79, so
yeah. Now, and is Indonesia your country of origin? Is that where you grew up, or where did you grow up?
No, I grew up in the north of England. So I was born in Yorkshire, in England, and then eventually moved to London for 4 years before moving to Bali in 2019. So I had what alcoholics refer to as a moment of clarity, I suppose, but it was in the shape of ayahuasca, which is a very potent indigenous South American plant medicine. It's a psychedelic, often used to help people with mental illnesses, mental health issues. And they say you're not supposed to make any major life-changing decision for at least 3 months after working with this medicine. But 3 days after that, I was in my boardroom in my creative agency in London, and I said to my whole team, "I'm sorry, guys, but I'm closing the business down in a month. I've had enough." And they're, "What? This is like the best month of the history of the business," and yada yada. I said, I know, but I'm actually really miserable. I hate my life. I hate this job. I hate this. I don't hate the company. I love you guys, but what this company is doing to me, it's making me very sick. I'm completely losing the point of being. I'm getting lost in the busyness of doing. So I've got to get out, and I'm closing it all down. I'm going to live in Bali. So that was that was how I got over here. I gave away and sold everything I owned, and with 2 bags and the beagle that saved my life, I flew to Bali in early 2019.
Wonderful. And kind of going back a little bit, did you have the relationship with your mom that you would have known maybe if she, how her upbringing was in a sense, what kind of led her in and down that road of alcoholism. You know, did you discover that along the way at least, or what was really the cause of that?
I was going to ask the same thing.
Great question. In honesty, no, I don't. I don't know enough about her familial history. Her dad died. I think he died before I was born. And I understand her mum was a drinker. her mum, her mum eventually went blind, and I do remember. I have memories of staying with her occasionally. She was a lovely woman, or at least I remember her as being a lovely woman. But I think the thing about my mum was my mum was brought up in a Catholic family in the north of England. My dad was brought up in a Catholic family in the north of England, both working class. Um, and I think she went to university and became a teacher, which was quite a big deal. Um, they I think both of their familial backgrounds were kind of that typical familial background from that time where people didn't really talk about emotions. People didn't. People just got on with stuff, and if they had a hard if the parents had a hard life, then then everybody just had to sort of trudge on through. I certainly get the impression that they both had their own issues with their parents. Um, and for whatever reason, my mum was incapable of talking about her alcoholism. So it's a very strange scenario, really, because it got to the point, as when I became a teenager, I wanted to talk about this. I wanted to try and do something about it. I wanted to try to help her, and I would sit with her and try to talk to her about it, but she would not admit that she was an alcoholic, which is no surprise because a lot of alcoholics don't know that they're alcoholics, just like a narcissist doesn't know they're a narcissist. But of course, when you drink the way my mum drank, there can be no doubt. And we had so many bizarre dramas as a result of her alcoholism. I remember being a small kid, and my mum was threatening to throw herself out the bedroom window, and my dad didn't know what to do. And he and my younger brother and I said, "Well, look, we'll try to restrain her." So he let us restrain her. So we basically tried to get her down and very mentally disturbed young children with a mentally disturbed mum, with a situation where your mum's trying to throw herself out the bedroom window. And I think we tried to tie her to the bed or something like that. And I can't remember whether or not that was effective, but I do remember that we then went downstairs. We were all sitting in the whatever you call it, living room, the lounge. And then next thing we knew, she'd escaped from the front of the house and run to a next door neighbor, barely clothed, drunk out of her mind, of course, and called the police. And so my dad and my two brothers were arrested and taken. Were we arrested or we were invited to the police station? I can't remember. I mean, I was a child. I was under. I don't even think I was 12. Maybe I was 12, and we were cautioned for kidnapping. Which, I mean, I don't know why I'm laughing now, but I suppose it is funny if you knew my family history. But this is the sort of thing that we had to deal with on a regular weekend in my family home. So yeah, she wasn't a well woman, bless her. And when she died, she died on January the 6th, 2014, and thankfully I'd seen her on the Christmas day. So we'd gone to, my partner and I at the time had visited the house. And she was okay, and so we had a bit of a chat. We didn't stay too long. We had a sort of Christmas breakfast. Gave her a kiss on the cheek, which was quite a rare thing, a rare moment of intimacy, and said goodbye. And that was that. That was the last time I ever saw her.
Wow. So when your mother passed the last time, did you feel guilty? Was that a part of more so drinking and the drug addiction? Was that a piece that created the heavy addictions?
Yeah, well, I was already, as it transpires, I was already addicted, but yeah, it was an opportunity for me to spiral further. Anyone who is familiar with addiction will know that ultimately we we look for an excuse to use. So if something good happens, you're celebrating. If something bad happens, you're commiserating. Either way, you're going to drink. You're going to use drugs. So yeah, when she died, it really hit me. It hit me because I realized that we'd never resolved any of the issues that we had for all of those years, despite me trying. I did try. I tried many, many, many times, and I suppose therefore the guilt came in because I'd I'd given up, and I'd given up a fair few years before. And actually, she got breast cancer, and she ended up with a double mastectomy, which she survived. It wasn't the cancer that killed her. And I wasn't really there. I wasn't present at all for any of that. I wasn't supportive at all through any of it. Primarily because every time I threw myself out there and put my heart on the line for the woman, she would trample on it. I would travel from wherever I was in the country back home, and for a Mother's Day, for example, flowers in the hand, bing bong on the door, and lo and behold, 9:30 in the morning, your mum's absolutely drunk out of her mind on a Sunday. So I just got to the point where I couldn't do it anymore. I had to protect my feelings in a way. Well, it was that was really, I suppose, the tactic. But as a result, we moved further and further apart, and we saw each other less. So I had all of that guilt to deal with, and funnily enough, that was one of the reasons why I think I wrote the book How to Die Happy, because one of the things that occurred to me through this journey was that we're all going to die. And that might sound like a really obvious thing to say, but actually, more often than not, in the West, we don't like to think about it. We don't like to talk about it. It's a taboo. If we do talk about it, it's what's the word? Morbid. But actually, when you're in a situation where life is just life, and you're getting on with your stuff and everyone else is getting on with their stuff, and of course you've allowed your relationship with your mother to absolutely deteriorate to essentially nothing, and then she's dead, that brings home many, many, many realizations. And of course, one of the things you find yourself asking is, what could I have done differently?
Absolutely. Now, on a personal level, I haven't been necessarily addicted to anything, but there was a lot of things circulating, just with family, where it was all just kind of normal. It was always around. But personally, I didn't like experiment with things until way after I was well able to do so. When was when did your interest in wanting to drink maybe come about? And when was it like you took that drink and it was it was all she wrote? When was kind of that moment for you? Can you explain that point in time and why that happened?
Yeah, I
Can you
think.
also add the drug addiction in after that when you started that, to piggyback off Sid's question?
Yeah, of course, of course. I think I probably started drinking when I was around four. Well, no, I started smoking weed when I was 14, 13 or 14, and I started selling it at school. Um, and I enjoyed the feeling of being stoned because, of course, it distracted me from real life. I really started drinking as soon as I was old enough to get into pubs and bars and nightclubs. So that was 14, 15, because I was quite tall. Well, I am still quite tall. I didn't get any shorter. So I was able to, with the right outfit, get into these places. And Yeah, you don't think about it, but back in those days, there was a nightclub in the city of York where it was 1 penny to get in before 9 o'clock, and it was £1 a pint, which is what, $1.25, $1.50. I don't know what the exchange rate is these days, for a pint of strong lager. So you would drink 10 pints of this stuff, usually on an empty stomach. And for a 15-year-old, that's a lot of alcohol. You get absolutely blind drunk. And what would happen as a result of that is, well, all the bad things that happen when you're blind drunk. Usually you're in a fight, or you fall over, or both. Usually you do something regretful sexually with someone, or maybe more than one people. In a night, and all of that stuff is what I did, and I got into it around from that age, really. I left home when I was 17, so then I was going out very regularly, drinking. I wasn't using hard drugs by that time, though. It was actually I drinking. My heavy drinking was normalized from that age. So, and I wasn't actually a bad drunk. So I wasn't one of these people who would get drunk and then start, getting in people's faces or falling over. Actually, I was chatty, I was fun, I was enjoyable to be around, and I think as a result of that, we have a different relationship with drinkers like that, don't we? If they don't annoy you and actually they encourage and they help you enjoy yourself when you're drinking, you're less likely to label them. I have no idea whether anyone was labeling me as anything at that time. I certainly wasn't, because for me, drinking excessively was normal. It had been introduced as normal to me as a child, hadn't it? And of course, while consciously we know it's not normal, subconsciously I didn't. So, and then around, I think, age 24, I was introduced to cocaine, and I'd just separated from my first wife, a marriage which obviously was doomed from the beginning due to my mental illness, and that was it. I was on a mission. I was obviously separated from my first wife. I was now living in the city of Leeds. I was working in a big advertising agency. I was earning good money. I had all of the whole vibe going on. So it was every night drink, drugs, drink, drugs, drink, drugs, sex, 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 with many different women, and strangers. Total strangers. I throughout my adult life, I slept with hundreds of women, and many of whom I could not remember or even name now. And I don't say that with any modicum of pride. There's no pride whatsoever. There's just authentic accountability for it. So all of this behavior and the self-harm that came with it, not just the self-harm through drinking and through being hit and hitting other people. I was quite a violent person as well. I was also self-harming as a child. I didn't realize I was self-harming at the time, but you remember tape cassettes? Music used to come in tape cassettes. Well, if ever I was angry or sad when I was in the childhood home, I would just I would lay out some tapes on the floor and I would punch them repeatedly until they were smashed to pieces and the plastic was in my knuckles and there was blood everywhere. And I did not know why I was doing this, and of course, it never occurred to me to consider it until later in life when I began learning about mental health issues and then fully understanding how the brain works and actually how we can eradicate or temporarily eradicate emotional pain by replacing it with literal physical pain. So all of these things, kind of rolled up into this compound ball of misery, stress, trauma, depression, and ultimately I realized, thanks to the help of the ayahuasca medicine, actually, and of an incredibly good therapist, that all of this stuff was just symptomatic. Actually, the alcoholism, the sex addiction, the drug addiction, the self-harm, they were all just symptoms of root trauma. And until I was ready to do the work on the root trauma, I would continue to act out to distract myself or to obliterate myself, annihilate myself in these various ways. So that's really where the major work began. To, as Rumi said, maybe you are searching among the branches for what only appears in the root and in the roots. And it was when I started to do that root work that I really started to heal myself and began this beautiful journey of self-healing.
Facing your traumas. That's what this is all about, is facing your trauma. I want to go
Right.
back because I heard you say something, and I want to make sure I get it right so that the audiences can see your part, because I think this is an important piece for people to acknowledge if they are doing this. You said you were an abuser. Were you a physical abuser, verbal abuser, emotional, financial?
Yeah, I was so as a narcissist, I was an emotional and psychological abuser. I I'm an articulate person, as you've gathered. So I was very good at debating, and I was very good at remembering what someone had said, for example. So in arguments, I would, what we say in English in England, browbeat. Like just keep energetically or emotionally beating someone on the brow, to the point where they just give up, which is a typical narcissistic trait. It's ultimately a way to win an argument is just to keep hammering and hammering and hammering, even though the person with whom you are having the argument, and these of course would be my female partners, they would just give up. They would say, please stop, just stop. And if they didn't say please stop, at least they were, anyone with any sense who wasn't mentally ill would know that it was time to stop. So yeah, I was a gaslighter. I would constantly make my partners feel as though they were losing their mind, as though they'd said something wrong, as though they'd done something wrong, while all the while, of course, it was me. And it took I couldn't tell you the exact point in time that it happened, but it was pretty much around the same time where I nearly killed myself, where I suddenly took a look back, metaphorically, over my shoulder, and I saw scorched earth and a scarred landscape and spilt milk under burnt bridges and so many wounded souls, wounded hearts and minds behind me from anyone who had been close enough to me to get burnt. And while I was smashing through all of that as a child and a young man, as far as I was concerned, what's wrong with this person? What's wrong with that person? Why has this person got that attitude problem? Why does that person have a problem? It never occurred to me, of course, that the common denominator in all of these emotions, all of these emotionally distraught interactions in relationships, was me. So I had to take a cold, hard stare at myself at that stage. And really, I don't think I did all of that work really until I got to Bali, where I started to do what we know as shadow work, which is inspired by the psychotherapist Carl Jung. He created the concept of the shadow self. So yeah, I had to sit in meditation for many days, weeks, in fact months, and work through these memories, work through truly accepting and acknowledging the person I had been up until then. So I started to well, actually, I didn't do the AA 12 steps, but there is a step in AA called step 9, which is making amends. And I started to do that. I started to reach out to people. I had actually been doing it prior to that, actually, because I'd been a year sober before I left Bali. Excuse me. although I'm not convinced I would have stayed sober had I not left and made all these changes. But I started to reach out to people and send them emails and messages just to wholly acknowledge that I knew who I had been and what I had done. And that was received in various ways, as you might imagine. I met a friend in London and to apologize to him, and he sat me down very concerned and said, "Have you got cancer?" And I said, "No. Why do you ask?" He said, "Oh, well, because everybody's talking about how you're reaching out to apologize to them, so everyone thinks you've been given a few months to live."
Oh, wow. But
Which
taking
is interesting, isn't it?
accountability is a beautiful thing. That is beautiful.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I own 100%. I own all that I have done, and I put it in this book. I put it in many articles that I write for publications and my own blog online. I put it on many podcasts. There is no just for the listeners, Dimitri asked me before we came on the call. Dimitri said, "Is there anything that's out of bounds?" And I said, "Nothing is out of bounds. I am now 100% authentic and vulnerable, and accepting for who I have been." But you must understand, of course, I this is also about trauma recovery, this podcast. And the point is, yeah, that's the person I have been, but that doesn't mean that's the person I am now. So, but I fully believe that we must sit in the searing hot pain of acceptance without mitigation, without trying to hide or push away any of these memories or push away any of these acknowledgements of the person we've been. We must sit in that until such time that we can finally let go. And I did let go. I got to the point where I could let go, and I forgave myself. I learned to love myself for the first time in 43 years. And I'm now 47. So through that process, I had this bizarre gift, the gift of a life within a life. You might call it a rebirth. I call it a miracle, and it's something for which I'm very grateful. And so I now still want to talk about these things because it's so important, I think, to be able to come on a podcast like this with you, to be this vulnerable, to express this truth, in the hope that others who haven't been fortunate enough to have a rebirth, if you like, who may well still be struggling with their authenticity or their truth, to know that you can, and to know that it's okay, and to know that actually, you, regardless of the issues that you have and whatever mental illness or neuroses you have, you are still love, and you deserve to have a happy life.
And that you do. But it's a long, hard road to get there, especially when you've been through some things.
For sure.
And it's hard to understand that it's just not owed to you. That is a tough pill to swallow. Because you just like, I'm here living, like I didn't ask to be here, like I didn't ask for nothing to happen to me, like I should just have good things, like I'm out of it, I'm done, I made it out, like I should have all the things. But there's more work required to get everything you need, to get everything you want.
There is. I totally agree. I think, and but then if you look at the society in which we live now, we are subject to programming everywhere you look. That what's on the TV, what's in the radio, what's on podcasts, what's on the internet, what's on these telephone things that many of us can't put down. We are subject to so much programming that tells us that we deserve this, we deserve that, we should have $1 million in the bank, we should have this car, we should live in that kind of house. Unfortunately, we live in a consumerist, materialist world where many of the leading figures, and I say leading with air quotes, who are so widely respected, actually worshipped by a lot of us, are ultimately celebrities and tech billionaires and so on and so forth. It's quite a perverse situation if you really look into it, because if we're spending all of our time looking out there or via the medium of a screen to see how we're supposed to live our life, then we're not living our lives, and we're getting a very funny idea about what living is. That ultimately is what I call the pursuit of unhappiness. One of the things I constantly talk about is the illusion of wealth, the illusion of success, the illusion of debt, and how all of these things tie us down into a very energetically draining system very early on, where we're left wanting. And as the Buddha said, attachment is the root of all suffering. And what he meant by that is, if we are clinging to something in a realm, planet Earth, where all things are impermanent, that is to say, everything is in a constant change or flux, then we do ourselves a great mental and emotional disservice to cling to anything, because it's impermanent. It's not going to stay the same. And this is why we suffer. We suffer because we cling, because we want, because we desire things. And more often than not, it's external things, isn't it? So yeah, I totally agree with you, Sid. But it's not just a singular problem. That it's a collective problem, and in part it's due to the conditioning that we all experience on a daily basis: familial, societal, televisual, governmental. The media have a lot to play, or a huge part to play in this, and ultimately, the only way we're going to fix it, I believe, is to detach from these things, is to put our mental health first, to switch off the noise, to start digital detoxing, and start asking ourselves what in life is really important. Right. But that's a whole other podcast.
Understood.
Bree, you're giving some good messages. So
yes. Now my question is, I kind of want to swing it to kind of your journey to Indonesia, because I always, when I hear how people have overcome certain things and in certain manners, in my mind as a viewer, I'm like, especially if I'm interested, I'm like, dang, I may want to do that. But when we hear these stories, we don't have the opportunity to get intricate and really see how it's done, or if it can be accomplished. So realistically, I'm not sure of what your financial situation was when you just upped and decided to leave the business and want to leave. But realistically, at bare minimum, what do you think someone would need that, wants to pack up and do their, love, pray, live life, food journey in Bali? What, at a minimum, would they need to get that done? And, kind of how was your build up there? How did you, settle in, get comfortable? How are you accepted? Like, how was the whole process of, moving to a whole nother country where you are visually not a native, and how did that work for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Nobody's ever asked me that before, actually. It's the movie and book is Eat, Pray, Love, isn't it? It's Julia Roberts, Elizabeth Gilbert that wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was some money in the business. So when I closed the business down, I was fortunate to take some money out, but it wasn't retirement money, and I'm not a rich man. I have had a significant amount of wealth in my time, but as is often the case with high functioning addiction, money flows through and out very quickly. As the more money you have, the more money you can spend on absolute insanity. So I've known great wealth and I've known great poverty. I was fortunate enough to have enough money to not work for the best part of a year. And I fully appreciate that not everybody, in fact, many people won't have that. But when I moved to Bali, actually, one of the reasons why I moved here was because it was a low cost of living. and it was super cheap. It was super peaceful. So how much did it cost? I suppose the flight was maybe £500, less than that, say $750, and it was obviously a one-way flight. And actually, you can live here, or you could, prior to this hyperinflationary world that we're all experiencing right now. You could live in a nice place, maybe even with a pool, for £400-500, maybe $600-700 a month.
What is that US dollar?
Yeah, I met probably about maybe $600-700 US dollars.
Okay.
And the thing is, which obviously to some people is expensive, and to some people isn't expensive. But the thing is, when you take a leap like I took, you're giving up everything. Most of my friends didn't understand what I was doing. A lot of my friends were still drinking and using, so they were kind of, I don't know if the word's irritated, but put it this way: I lost a lot of friends when I made this life decision. So you are, as you said, Sid, a stranger in a strange land. In Bali, everyone's got a brown face. So this white guy turns up from England, but of course it's not. There are many expats here, because actually it is a place. It's a global center, is Bali, where many people gravitate.
Yeah, very nomadic center.
It is. Yeah. There are a lot of digital nomads here, and I think it's depending on what you believe, of course, but I believe that this place is an energetic center, a global energetic center that offers deep healing for people. There is a deeply spiritual land. You see, there in the main the main religion is Balinese Hinduism, and they everything is a mindful worship practice here. It's absolutely beautiful, and regardless of what you believe about metaphysics or God or religion, when you've got so many people dedicated to love and to prayer, and they're putting that out in the air, it's everywhere. That energy is everywhere. So it's a beautiful place to be. So I wouldn't have said it's actually all. I think many people get stuck with the whole idea of, obviously fear gets in the way, doesn't it? I can't give up my life. Well, why can't you give up your life? Are you enjoying your life? No, I hate it. Okay, so in some way you've got to give up your life because you deserve change. I can't sell my house. Why can't you sell your house? I can't. What about all the things in the house? Well, as I've explained, you can sell all of them as well. And actually, while you're at it, when you have actually got rid of all of the crap in your house, perhaps adopt something called minimalism, which is a whole philosophy in itself, which I also write about in the book. The idea that we really don't need the lion's share of the crap that is sitting around in our house. And when we get rid of it, there's a mental health decluttering just by removing all of this stuff from your space. And then, of course, the question is, what are you going to do with yourself? Well, I didn't know what I was going to do with myself. Obviously, I closed down a company that was, it had its problems, but ultimately it had grown to a good size, and was doing well. I don't have to that. I decided I was going to reinvent myself. I decided I was going to start writing things that really mattered. That's why I wrote this book. I wanted to start applying my writing skills to something that wasn't convincing people to buy shit they neither needed nor wanted. I'm not sure if I can swear on your podcast. I apologize.
This is unfiltered, unspoken.
Yeah. I'm bad with it, so
I had that in my mind. So I took it. I thought, yeah, we can drop the S word. Excuse me. So I'd spent 25 years in the marketing industry writing stuff to convince the listeners of this podcast to buy shit they neither need nor want. And frankly, it's a pretty soul destroying thing to do, because it's not. Yeah, it pays well. But and there is I guess, an element of fulfillment as you are taking a problem and producing a solution, but it's not doing anything for the world, is it? It's not in service to others. And having spent the first 40 odd years of my life in service to self, I was now very clear that I must dedicate the next part, for however long that is, of my life in service to others. So I got into this. I pivoted my writing and started. Now, I must say, I'm not making a load of money doing it. You know, I'm a new author. This is a new book. It's about happiness. So it's the largest, busiest category on Amazon. I'm up against the Dalai Lama, for Christ's sake. So, you know, and he's got budget and a marketing team. So it's not without its financial issues making a move like this. But herein lies my point. When you realize that actually money isn't everything, and status isn't everything, and the car and the house and the watch and the clothes and what all, you know, all the bullshit that we throw money at isn't really real, and it's not actually who we are. They're all just illusory facets of our identity. And then you strip those away, then you start to see who you really are. Okay, so I'm not the Swiss watch. I'm not the Aston Martin. I'm not the you know, the flat in, or the house in so and so. I'm not that wardrobe. And of course, ego doesn't like that, because this is all ego. These are all facets of the dense layer cake of our ego. So the moment you start to challenge your ego and say, hey, I've just realized I don't need as much of you in my life as I have had, so I'm going to get rid of this and I'm going to get rid of that, then your essence, if you like, or at least your mental essence, gets quite distraught by the idea. Doesn't like the idea, because if we don't have ego, then what do we have? And if ego isn't protecting us, then what's going to happen to us? So it's that limbic brain trying to do its job of protecting us. But once you do get rid of, or once, certainly in my experience anyway, having given away or sold everything that I owned and starting afresh, I was able to live a more simple life, and ultimately, and ask myself, well, what do I need? Well, if I'm not drinking alcohol, I'm not smoking cigarettes, I'm not doing drugs, you know, I've stopped going out to the same sort of places I used to go to. I've actually stopped eating meat, and I've reduced my sugar intake. Well, I tell you what, you save a lot of money as it goes, because you don't realize how much money we throw away on this stuff, because we're encouraged to do so by society, and we're also encouraged to get into debt from a very young age to pay for it all. And then we're stuck on that loop, aren't we? That hamster wheel.
Yeah.
So having detached myself from it all, it was life then became about, okay, well, who do I want to be now then? So then I started to look into all of these modalities that would help me repair this broken body, this broken mind, and this broken heart. And yeah, some of that stuff costs a bit of money. You know, you have to spend $5 on a yoga class over here. But what value does that bring to me, as opposed to spending more like $150 a night plus on, in fact, way more on drugs and alcohol? And there is no debate. There is no debate whatsoever.
Agreed. So I have a question really quick. So when you left and came to Bali, did you go cold turkey, no drugs, no sexual addiction, no alcohol, no smoking cigarettes? Did you come cold turkey, or did it take a process for you to finally release?
Well, I'd already quit drinking in the February of 2018. So what happened was I was doing what we call a pitch, a new business pitch to ironically to a whiskey brand in the north of England, and we did the pitch. It was a good pitch, so we started drinking, and we probably drank, I don't know, 6-7 pints of beer. Then we got on the train from the north of England up to Scotland, a place called Glasgow, which, if I recall, is probably 3 or 4 hour train journey, something like that. And we drank the whole journey. And we got into Glasgow, and I couldn't tell you if I checked into the hotel, but we went out drinking, had something to eat and drank. And so I was blind drunk. And I woke up the next day in my hotel room, and as soon as I moved, I had this searing pain in my knee, and I kind of looked around blurry-eyed, and the room was trashed. And as I started to try and piece the what had happened together, I realized that before I went to bed, I was trying to drink a glass of water, and I slipped on the floor because it was a kind of a parquet floor thing, and I twisted my knee really badly. And I was so angry with myself for being this drunken mess that I trashed the room, including throwing the laptop I was going to use to do this big presentation in Glasgow at the wall several times. So the laptop was smashed. It was an Apple laptop, smashed to bits. So suddenly I'm in this situation with what it transpired was a torn meniscus on the inside of my knee, which is very, very painful injury. Trashed hotel room, smashed computer, and then I had to get my shit together and go to this large mortgage company and do this big presentation, 4-hour workshop with 10 people, including the CEO of this business. And I did it. I got through it. I made up a story about falling over and hurting my knee, and did the workshop, and everybody was happy. And then I had to go home and explain it to my partner, and then we had a 2-week snowboarding holiday, and I couldn't snowboard for the whole holiday because I had this hideous injury. And so I drank every day on that holiday. I was drinking Austrian beer, which is even stronger at high altitude, which gets you even drunker. And I just spent that whole week, I suppose, assessing what my addiction was doing. And I remember she joined me at this bar. We spent the week arguing and obviously drunken fallouts and so on and so forth. And then I sat at this bar and I finished a beer and I put it down and I said, "That's the last drink I'm ever going to drink." And of course, she said, "Yeah, right." And then I got home and I told people, and they said, "Yeah, right." And I suppose even I was saying to myself, "Yeah, right, this isn't going to happen." But it was such a shocking experience and realization that I've never drank since then. There were times early on in 2018 where I did want to drink. I'd already quit smoking. And the thing about alcohol, drugs, and cocaine and cigarettes is they have this weird little threesome relationship. You have a drink, you want to smoke, and then the thing that's missing is the cocaine. So having removed the cigarettes and then removed the alcohol, I remember using cocaine a few times after that in 2018. And of course, everyone around me was using it and very keen for me to continue using it. But slowly but surely, because I wasn't drinking, and then I was started in the end of 2018, started to meditate and come across these other things. I just realized I didn't need it. I didn't want it in my life. So actually, here I'm 5 years sober now, by the way. And I've never wanted a drink. In spite of having still what you would consider life events that would drive someone else to drink. It's never crossed my mind, but I largely think that's to do with the ayahuasca, because what the ayahuasca medicine does is, people will often say it's like 10 years of therapy or 20 years of therapy in one ceremony. It's a very profoundly potent medicine. And incidentally, I'm suggesting that if anybody is interested in working with psychedelics, do it with the right mindset, in the right setting, with the right guide. Very, very important. So what ayahuasca does really is it reaches into your subconscious, unconscious, because it breaks away the egoic mind. It's sort of it dissolves the egoic mind is probably the best way to put it, leaving you open to all sorts of new ideas and ways to re-engineer your broken mind, for want of a better word. So it reaches into your subconscious, unconscious, and it pulls out memories, it pulls out traumas, and it represents them to you. But it doesn't sort of present them like have this scary memory. It does it in a way that you are, because your ego has been set aside or dissolved, you are able to see the trauma in a way that enables you to to understand it with love, to forgive yourself or the other parties involved in the trauma, it's nothing short of miraculous. It's an incredibly cathartic medicine, and ultimately enables you to see 360-degree perspective of the trauma, understand that it's no longer, you no longer need it, and then you let it go. And having done a great deal of work with those medicines since 2019, I've let go of so much trauma, and of course I've done other modalities like breath work, and I've actually just come back from a week in the jungle doing a silent meditation retreat, and the meditation type that we worked with, the technique is also designed to release trauma from your body through meditation.
Wonderful. So we are kind of at our hour mark here. What we like to do, Martin, you see your tags running across the bottom here on the banner. Just give the viewers, tell them how they can contact you, utilize your services, where they can purchase your book, any events, activities, anything you got going on. This is where you're on the stage.
Thank you. Well, I didn't realize we've been talking for an hour. I talked a lot, so I apologize.
No, you did what you were supposed to do.
Exactly. We didn't have to dig for it. So you're just making our job easy. That's it. That's it.
Well, I hope it was helpful. Yeah. Well, you can find me on Instagram at Martin O'Toole. I have a podcast, which is the How to Die Happy podcast, which is How to Die Happy _podcast. You can find the book, of course, at howtodiehappybook.com. You can find it on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, all sorts of websites. There's a paperback, there's an audio book, and there's a Kindle/ebook version. So if you're not a paperback reader, then you can get the audiobook version. The audiobook I narrated, and my partner Jules reads all of the meditations that are in there, because there are a lot of meditations. And actually, I took a sound recorder around Bali in Indonesia on our travels, and I recorded the sounds of the jungle and the ocean and the rainforests of Bali, and so we put that into the audiobook just to make it. I suppose Bali provided so much healing for me. I wanted to share a little bit of Bali's healing with the listeners of the audiobook. Other than that, that's it. I mean, I have a newsletter which you can follow, and of course you can read my blogs. Yeah, please do consider buying my book. And thank you, ladies, for having me on your show. I've really enjoyed it. Some great questions.
Absolutely. I have one more thing really quick. If you could give us 1 minute, can you give the best advice for those that are going through the healing trauma of trying to overcome alcohol, drugs, mental health? Just one thing that helped you heal that you can give advice to the audience.
Yeah, I would say that all of this work begins and ends with meditation. It begins and ends with a daily meditation practice. Eckhart Tolle once said, "One conscious breath is a meditation." So if you are not a meditator, and you might think it's a very alien concept, please do consider looking at it and observing it, because meditation is our number one superpower that every one of us can do for free with very little inconvenience, and it provides massive transformational opportunities. And there are loads of ways you can do it, and there are apps you can use, and as I said, I've got guided meditations you can check out. There are plenty of guided meditations on YouTube and so on and so forth. But if you want to overcome addiction or any mental illness whatsoever, then you have to start seeing that there are two parties at play inside us. There is our ego, our egoic mind, all of our experiences, and there is our consciousness. Consciousness wants to come out, but you've got to give it space to do so. And a great way to do that is through breath and meditation.
I love it. And I just followed you on Instagram. Come follow me back, Miss Confidence 79.
Will do. Thank you very much.
Martin, we want to thank you again for being on Unfiltered Unspoken podcast. And again, we're going to continue to share life experiences of others to help others going through similar situations in hopes that you will connect with someone's life experience. And if you listen to Martin today, he's told you about his narcissistic behaviors, drug addiction, alcohol addictions, mental health, and a few more topics. But it streamed from his childhood, the neglect, the alcohol abuse, and the things that he went through. He's acknowledged the anger and the aggression issues. But the biggest piece of what he said is taking accountability. And he took accountability for everything. And not just taking accountability, he was able to apologize to people for the behaviors that had occurred through the years, which people looked at him like he was crazy. But he was accepting his life and taking back his life and taking accountability over his life so that he can be free and take the shackles off to start the journey to healing. So I hope that Martin has helped you with sharing his testimony. And it's always good to hear from a male his perspective, because we typically hear the woman's perspective and what we are going through before a male to take on accountabilities of narcissistic behaviors and abuse. It's very powerful. So we want to thank Martin O'Toole again, straight from Bali, Indonesia. And it was an honor to have him. And thank you for tuning into Unfiltered Unspoken podcast. We'll see you soon.